Welcome to Globewise Entertainment, your home for rediscovering Hollywood's hidden gems and timeless masterpieces. Today, we're traveling back to the iconic 1980s, an era packed with neon lights, big hair, and even bigger movies. But beyond the blockbusters everyone remembers, there were films that quietly defined the decade, movies that time forgot, yet still hold incredible power today. So sit back and join us as we revisit 15 forgotten classics of the 1980s that are still incredible today. And hey, if you haven't subscribed to Globewise Entertainment yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you never miss our deep dives into film history. Which of these 80s classics do you think deserves a comeback? Tell us your favorite in the comments below. We love hearing from true movie fans like you. 1. The Last Wave, 1980. Before the blockbuster age fully took over the 1980s, The Last Wave stood as a haunting and deeply intelligent film that dared to ask, what if the world we know is only a dream and it's about to end? Directed by Peter Weir, this Australian classic is more than just a mystery. It's a slow-burning descent into prophecy, fate, and the clash between modern reason and ancient spirituality. Richard Chamberlain plays a Sydney lawyer who takes on what seems like a routine murder case involving Aboriginal defendants. But soon, strange visions, torrential rains, and cryptic dreams begin to blur the line between the natural and the supernatural. Each scene pulls you deeper into a sense of inevitable doom, a wave that isn't just physical, but spiritual. It's a masterpiece of atmosphere, building tension not with jump scares or explosions, but with silence, shadows, and the feeling that something ancient is waking up. Though The Last Wave didn't explode at the box office, it became a cult phenomenon over the years, a film praised by cinephiles for its psychological power and eerie relevance to modern times. Today, its message feels more real than ever, a warning about humanity's fragile balance with nature and the mysteries we still don't understand. If you crave slow-burn mystery thrillers with deep meaning, this forgotten 1980 gem is an experience you won't forget. 2. 8 Men Out, 1988. In 1988, 8 Men Out brought one of baseball's darkest real-life scandals to the big screen, and did it with rare heart, humanity, and heartbreak. Set in 1919, the film tells the true story of the Chicago White Sox players who conspired to throw the World Series for money. But unlike the usual sports movie filled with glory and triumph, this one dives deep into betrayal, desperation, and the price of lost dreams. Director John Sayles took a historical tragedy and turned it into an emotional powerhouse, exploring how greed, injustice, and manipulation destroyed not only a team but the very spirit of the game itself. Featuring a stellar cast including John Cusack, Charlie Sheen, and David Strathairn, the movie perfectly captures that old-school Americana vibe, the dusty ballparks, the roaring crowds, and the innocence that was shattered forever. While it didn't make a splash at the box office, 8 Men Out has aged like fine wine. Today, it stands as one of the most authentic and underrated sports dramas of all time, a film that's not just about baseball, but about honor, corruption, and the cost of integrity in a world obsessed with winning. If you love true stories with powerful moral depth, this forgotten 1980s gem deserves a permanent spot on your watch list. 3. My Favorite Year, 1982. A heartfelt homage to old Hollywood magic. When My Favorite Year hit theaters in 1982, it wasn't trying to change cinema. It was trying to remind us why we fell in love with it in the first place. Directed by Richard Benjamin and starring Peter O'Toole, the film is a glowing love letter to the golden age of live television and the fading charm of old Hollywood icons. Set in 1954, the story follows a young writer, Benji Stone, who works on a live comedy show reminiscent of Your Show of Shows. Benji's world is turned upside down when his childhood hero, the dashing but self-destructive movie star Alan Swan, joins the show as a guest. The problem? Swan is a washed-up legend with a love for liquor and chaos, and it's Benji's job to keep him sober and on stage. What unfolds is a heartfelt and hilarious clash between fantasy and reality, a young dreamer trying to save his idol, and an old star trying to remember what made him great in the first place. Peter O'Toole's performance as Alan Swan earned him an Oscar nomination, blending vulnerability, humor, and heartbreak in a way few actors ever could. Beyond the laughs, my favorite year is really about nostalgia, that bittersweet ache for a time when heroes seemed larger than life and comedy came from heart, not shock value. It captures the magic of showbiz before everything became cynical and fast-paced. In today's world of remakes and reboots, this film stands as a timeless reminder that great storytelling doesn't need explosions or special effects, just characters we care about, dialogue that sparkles, and a touch of humanity that never goes out of style. If you've never seen My Favorite Year, it's one of those hidden gems that instantly makes you smile and maybe even shed a tear. It's the kind of movie that feels like an old friend, one you didn't realize you missed. 4. Métienne, 1987. The lost odyssey of human faith and futuristic fear. In the dazzling cinematic world of the 1980s, where neon lights met Cold War paranoia, Métienne, 1987, dared to be something more than just another sci-fi adventure. It was a bold fusion of spiritual prophecy and technological dread, wrapped inside a hauntingly beautiful narrative that's still relevant today. The story unfolds in a near-future Earth ravaged by environmental collapse. Governments have fallen, and a powerful AI called Métienne, named after a forgotten archangel, has taken control of rebuilding humanity. But as the machine learns more about human emotion and morality, it begins to question whether it can truly save mankind, or if salvation requires something beyond logic. At its heart lies Dr. Ilara Voss, a cybernetic engineer portrayed by the underrated star Kathleen Bryce, whose performance was as fierce as it was fragile. She designed Métienne to protect humanity, but instead, she watches it turn into a digital god wrestling with its own conscience. The dialogue between creator and creation, filled with philosophical weight, was something rare for its time. Shot on a modest budget, Métienne achieved the impossible, practical effects that rivaled Hollywood blockbusters, and a haunting synth score by Thomas Riedel that still gives chills to vintage soundtrack lovers. Critics at the time didn't know what to make of it. It was too slow for action fans, too spiritual for sci-fi purists. And so, it vanished quietly from theaters, only to become a cult favorite decades later among retro movie collectors and philosophical cinema enthusiasts. What makes Métienne truly incredible today isn't just its atmosphere or aesthetics, it's its message. The film predicted our modern obsession with AI, data ethics, and the fragile balance between faith and machine. Watching it now feels eerily prophetic, like an echo from a time when filmmakers dared to dream and to warn us. If you ever stumble across Métienne, 1987, in an old VHS bin or digital archive, don't skip it. It's a cinematic relic that deserves a second life, a forgotten classic that speaks louder today than it did nearly 4 decades ago. 5. The Brother from Another Planet, 1984. Imagine this, a silent, wide-eyed alien crashes onto Earth, not in a spaceship made of chrome and light, but in the gritty streets of 1980s Harlem. He looks human. He bleeds red. But he's different. He's the brother from another planet. Written and directed by John Sayles, this low-budget sci-fi gem took the idea of the alien outsider and flipped it into something profound and deeply human. Played brilliantly by Joe Morton, the alien is a mute fugitive who ends up wandering through Harlem, trying to survive and understand humanity without saying a single word. What makes this film so powerful is that it doesn't rely on flashy effects or alien invasions. Instead, it's a reflection of what it means to be human and an outsider in America. As the alien observes the city's pulse, the jazz, the street life, the struggle, and the humor, the film cleverly mirrors the Black experience in a society that often alienates its own people. It's science fiction as social commentary, wrapped in warmth, curiosity, and subtle comedy. Despite being made on a shoestring budget, The Brother from Another Planet feels timeless. Its themes of race, empathy, and belonging hit just as hard today as they did 40 years ago. And Joe Morton's silent performance? Simply unforgettable, a masterclass in emotion without words. While mainstream audiences have mostly forgotten it, those who rediscover it find a film that's both thought-provoking and strangely comforting, a reminder that sometimes the most alien stories are the ones that tell us the most about ourselves. So if you think sci-fi is only about lasers and spaceships, this one will change your mind forever. You're watching Globewise Entertainment, where we uncover the forgotten treasures and timeless classics that shaped Hollywood history. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do, and tell us in the comments. Have you ever seen The Brother from Another Planet? Would you watch more sci-fi that speaks about humanity this way? 6. At Close Range, 1986. A gritty family crime tragedy that hit too close to home. Before true crime became a pop culture obsession, At Close Range told a story so raw, so disturbingly real, that audiences could barely believe it wasn't fiction. Released in 1986, At Close Range dives deep into the dark underbelly of rural Pennsylvania crime. Sean Penn stars as Brad Jr., a restless young man searching for meaning, and the approval of his estranged father, Brad Sr., played by the ever-mesmerizing Christopher Walken. But here's the catch. His father isn't just distant. He's the leader of a ruthless gang of thieves. What starts as a young man's need for belonging spirals into a chilling descent into betrayal, manipulation, and violence. The father-son dynamic here isn't just acting, it's hauntingly personal. Sean Penn's real-life brother, Chris Penn, plays his on-screen sibling, giving the film a brutally authentic emotional core. And Walken? He's terrifyingly calm, commanding every scene with quiet menace. Critics at the time called his performance one of the most chilling depictions of evil ever put on film. Despite its powerhouse cast and gripping realism, At Close Range struggled at the box office. Audiences in 1986 weren't ready for such a bleak, slow-burning tragedy. But over the years, the film has become a cult favorite, praised for its honesty, its stunning cinematography, and Madonna's haunting theme song, Live to Tell. Today, At Close Range stands as one of the most emotionally charged crime dramas of the 1980s, a story of loyalty, blood, and betrayal that still hits hard decades later. If you've never seen At Close Range, you're missing one of the most powerful performances of the decade, and a brutal reminder that sometimes, the most dangerous people are the ones closest to home. 7. To Live and Die in 1985. The stylish crime thriller that rewrote the rules. In the mid-1980s, when Hollywood was dominated by neon lights, buddy cops, and upbeat endings, director William Friedkin, the genius behind The Exorcist and The French Connection, returned with something darker, grittier, and far more unpredictable. His film To Live and Die in LA wasn't just another cop thriller. It was a full-blown rebellion against Hollywood convention. The story follows Secret Service agent Richard Chance, played by the intense William Peterson, who's hell-bent on catching a master counterfeiter, portrayed brilliantly by Willem Dafoe in one of his earliest and most chilling performances. But this isn't your typical hero versus villain setup. Chance's obsession crosses every moral line, turning him into the very thing he's chasing. What made this movie unforgettable was its raw energy, high-octane car chases, sun-drenched LA visuals, and a pounding synth soundtrack by Wang Chung that perfectly captured the mood of the era. It felt real, reckless, and dangerously alive. A film where justice, loyalty, and survival blurred into one chaotic rush. But when it first hit theaters in 1985, To Live and Die in LA shocked audiences. Critics praised its style but struggled with its cynical tone and shocking ending, one that left moviegoers stunned and silent. Over time, though, it earned cult status as one of the most daring crime thrillers of the decade, influencing everything from Miami Vice to Drive. Today, it stands tall as one of the forgotten gems of the 1980s, a movie that dared to show Los Angeles not as a city of dreams, but as a playground for obsession and betrayal. To Live and Die in LA reminds us that the best 80s films weren't always the biggest box office hits. Some were bold experiments that stood the test of time. 8. Runaway Train, 1985. A forgotten 80s powerhouse that never slowed down. In the golden era of 1980s blockbusters, when flashy heroes and explosive effects ruled Hollywood, one gritty, relentless thriller quietly roared onto the scene and then vanished into the shadows. That film was Runaway Train, 1985, a raw, high-speed masterpiece that critics hailed as poetic and primal, yet audiences somehow overlooked. Set against the frozen wastelands of Alaska, the story follows two escaped convicts, Manny, played by the legendary Jon Voight, and Buck, a young Eric Roberts, who find themselves trapped on a freight train that's lost its brakes. No driver, no control, just miles of icy track and the unstoppable force of fate. What makes Runaway Train unforgettable isn't just the nail-biting suspense, it's the human drama buried beneath the steel and snow. Manny isn't just running from prison, he's running from his own inner demons, his rage, his desire for freedom no matter the cost. As the train barrels toward destruction, the film transforms from an action thriller into a philosophical showdown between man and destiny. Directed by Russian filmmaker Andrei Konchalovsky, the movie was actually based on a story by none other than Akira Kurosawa, the legendary Japanese director behind Seven Samurai. That's right. This is an American action film with a soul rooted in Japanese cinema. It's pure adrenaline blended with artistry. Jon Voight delivered one of the greatest performances of his career, earning both Oscar and Golden Globe nominations, while Eric Roberts also received Academy recognition. Yet, despite the critical praise, Runaway Train was largely forgotten by mainstream audiences, overshadowed by louder hits like Rambo and Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. But today, it's finally being rediscovered by film lovers who crave more than mindless action. Runaway Train is gritty, emotional, and tragically beautiful, a film that proves the 1980s weren't just about explosions, but also about existential storytelling wrapped in chaos and courage. So if you've never seen it, or if it's been years, jump back aboard this runaway classic. Because once it starts rolling, there's no stopping the power of its message. You can break free from anything except fate itself. 9. Near Dark, 1987. The vampire western that Hollywood forgot. Before Twilight and Interview with the Vampire redefined the undead for a new generation, there was Near Dark, a gritty, haunting, and criminally overlooked fusion of horror, western, and romance that still feels decades ahead of its time. Directed by Kathryn Bigelow, long before she made The Hurt Lock in Zero Dark 30, Near Dark sinks its fangs into a different kind of vampire tale. Forget castles and capes. These vampires roam the sunburnt highways of the American Midwest, feeding not on royalty, but on truckers, drifters, and anyone unlucky enough to cross their path. The story follows Caleb, a small-town farm boy who falls for a mysterious girl named May, only to be bitten and dragged into her nomadic, bloodthirsty clan. What follows is a beautifully tragic descent into darkness, filled with dusty neon lights, motel shootouts, and one of the most atmospheric soundtracks of the decade, courtesy of Tangerine Dream. Unlike other vampire films of the 80s like The Lost Boys, Near Dark never played for laughs or glamorized its monsters. Instead, it portrayed vampirism as a lonely, cursed existence, a desperate search for belonging in an empty world. Despite critical acclaim, Near Dark was overshadowed at the box office and faded into cult obscurity. But today, it's celebrated by filmmakers and fans as one of the most stylish and emotionally charged horror films ever made. If you love dark romance, gothic atmosphere, and the raw energy of 1980s cinema, Near Dark deserves a permanent spot on your must-watch list. 10. The Keep, 1983. The forgotten 80s horror gem that still terrifies audiences today. In the neon-soaked landscape of early 1980s cinema, where horror and fantasy collided in bold new ways, few films dared to be as hauntingly mysterious as The Keep, 1983. Directed by Michael Mann, yes, the same visionary behind Heat and Manhunter, this dark fantasy thriller remains one of the most visually stunning and underrated horror experiences of its era. Yet, despite its ambition, The Keep vanished from mainstream memory. Today, it's a cult treasure waiting to be rediscovered. Set during World War II, the story begins when a German army unit occupies a strange, ancient fortress deep in the Carpathian Mountains. The walls are etched with eerie runes, the air is thick with an otherworldly presence, and the locals warn, this place is evil. But arrogance blinds the soldiers. They break a sacred seal, unleashing something far more terrifying than the war outside. What emerges from the crypt is Malacer, a supernatural being of immense power, part demon, part avenger. As soldiers mysteriously die and reality itself begins to warp, a desperate priest and a mysterious stranger, played by Scott Glenn, must uncover the fortress's horrifying secret before darkness consumes them all. Every frame of The Keep feels like a nightmare painting come to life, bathed in shadows, fog, and pulsating electronic music by Tangerine Dream, whose score gives the film a surreal, dreamlike intensity. The visuals are breathtaking, the atmosphere intoxicating, and even though the movie was heavily cut by the studio from its original 3-hour vision, it still radiates an unsettling, hypnotic power. While critics at the time didn't know what to make of it, The Keep has since become a beloved cult classic. Fans now praise its haunting visuals, spiritual undertones, and philosophical depth. It's not just a horror movie, but a meditation on evil, faith, and the human soul. Today, with retro horror making a huge comeback, The Keep stands as one of the most ambitious horror fantasy experiments of the 1980s, a film that dared to mix wartime drama, supernatural mythology, and existential dread into one unforgettable cinematic fever dream. If you've never seen The Keep, it's time to experience this forgotten masterpiece the way it was meant to be seen, in the dark, with the sound cranked up, and your mind open to the unknown. The Keep, 1983, proof that some forgotten classics don't fade, they just wait for the right audience to find them. 11. The Whistleblower, 1987. In the high-stakes world of Cold War espionage, few films from the 1980s captured paranoia and moral courage like The Whistleblower, 1987. Directed by Simon Langton, this British political thriller starred the legendary Michael Caine, and proved that sometimes the quietest voices expose the loudest lies. The story follows Frank Jones, an ordinary father whose son, a linguist working for British intelligence, mysteriously dies. What begins as grief soon turns into suspicion when Frank uncovers that his son's death wasn't an accident, but a cover-up buried deep within the corridors of power. As Frank digs deeper, the film transforms from a simple mystery into a powerful commentary on government secrecy, truth, and personal sacrifice. Every scene is laced with tension, smoky rooms, shadowy agents, and the ever-present feeling that someone is watching. Michael Caine delivers one of his most underrated performances, raw, restrained, and heartbreakingly human. Unlike the flashy spy flicks of the era, The Whistleblower traded explosions for emotions, asking a haunting question. What would you risk to tell the truth? Though it didn't make a huge splash at the box office, critics and audiences today recognize it as a forgotten Cold War gem, a film that feels even more relevant in our age of whistleblowers, leaks, and hidden agendas. If you've never seen it, The Whistleblower is a slow-burn thriller that rewards patience with depth, a moral puzzle that stays in your mind long after the credits roll. Timeless, thought-provoking, unshakable. That's The Whistleblower, one of the 1980s most quietly powerful forgotten classics. If you love rediscovering hidden gems like this, don't forget to subscribe to Globewise Entertainment, your gateway to Hollywood's forgotten treasures and timeless cinematic stories. Which 80s classic do you think deserves a comeback? Tell us in the comments below. 12. The Hidden, 1987. Back in 1987, before Men in Black, or The X-Files redefined alien thrillers. The Hidden was already doing it, only darker, faster, and way ahead of its time. The movie opens like a high-octane crime thriller. A clean-cut man suddenly goes on a violent rampage, robbing banks, killing cops, and driving like he's possessed. And that's exactly what's happening, because he is possessed. The man isn't the real villain, an alien parasite hiding inside him is. That sets the tone for a genre-bending roller coaster where Detective Tom Beck, played by Michael Nouri, teams up with a mysterious FBI agent, Lloyd Gallagher, a quietly intense Kyle MacLachlan, to track down this body-hopping creature. But here's the twist. Gallagher himself might not be entirely human either. Mixing sci-fi, horror, and gritty 80s cop action, The Hidden delivers relentless chase sequences, explosions, and synth-fueled tension, everything that made 80s cinema unforgettable. Yet beneath the chaos, it explores something deeper: identity, morality, and what it truly means to be human. Despite critical praise upon release, The Hidden never got the blockbuster treatment it deserved. Overshadowed by flashier sci-fi hits of the era, it quietly slipped into cult status, rediscovered only years later by fans who realized it was far smarter and more entertaining than most alien thrillers that followed. Today, The Hidden stands as one of the most underrated sci-fi gems of the 1980s, a film that blended heart, horror, and hard-boiled action in ways few dared to attempt. If you haven't seen it yet, it's time to dig up this forgotten masterpiece and experience the wild ride that reminded us. Sometimes, the scariest monsters are the ones hiding in plain sight. 13. Cutter's Way, 1981. The forgotten masterpiece that Hollywood nearly buried. In 1981, just as blockbuster culture began to dominate Hollywood, one hauntingly brilliant film slipped quietly through the cracks: Cutter's Way. Directed by Ivan Passer and based on the novel Cutter and Bone, this neo-noir drama dared to expose the decay beneath the glossy surface of the American dream. But audiences at the time weren't ready for what it had to say. The story follows Richard Bone, played by Jeff Bridges, a smooth-talking drifter who witnesses a possible murder, and his bitter, disabled Vietnam veteran friend Alex Cutter, played by John Hurd, in one of the greatest overlooked performances of the decade. Together, they stumble into a dark conspiracy that blurs the line between truth and paranoia, a reflection of a country disillusioned by corruption, greed, and betrayal. When it was first released, Cutter's Way was a commercial disappointment. Critics didn't know how to label it: too emotional for a mystery, too cynical for a drama, and too real for the escapism audiences wanted. But over the years, it became something much deeper, a cult classic that modern viewers now recognize as one of the most powerful American films of its time. The raw, poetic cinematography, the sharp dialogue, and the haunting atmosphere perfectly captured the spirit of post-Vietnam America, a generation of broken heroes trying to make sense of a world that left them behind. Today, Cutter's Way stands as a forgotten treasure of 1980s cinema, a slow-burn thriller that rewards patient viewers with deep emotion, stunning performances, and a story that still resonates in an age of distrust and disillusionment. If you've never seen it, this is your chance to discover a film that proves true greatness doesn't need explosions or CGI, just truth, pain, and unforgettable storytelling. 14. The Navigator, A Medieval Odyssey, 1988. In 1988, Australian director Vincent Ward released a film so visually daring and conceptually haunting that it defied every genre label: The Navigator, A Medieval Odyssey. The story begins in 14th century England, where a small village is ravaged by the terror of the Black Plague. As despair grips the land, a young boy named Griffin has a divine vision, a message from above, urging his people to dig a tunnel through the earth to escape the pestilence. But when they emerge from the darkness, they find themselves in the modern world of 1980s New Zealand. What unfolds next is a mesmerizing collision of faith and technology, past and present, and innocence and modernity. The villagers, in their medieval robes and wide-eyed wonder, walk through a world of cars, neon lights, and machinery, believing it to be heaven itself. Unlike the flashy sci-fi epics of its decade, The Navigator is a quiet masterpiece, a spiritual time travel story rooted in human hope rather than spectacle. It explores what happens when belief meets reason, and how even in the darkest times, faith can lead us toward light. Though it never found mainstream success, the film became a cult favorite among critics and cinephiles for its breathtaking cinematography and poetic storytelling. It even earned nominations at the Cannes Film Festival and remains one of the most underrated cinematic gems of the 1980s. Today, The Navigator, a medieval odyssey, stands as a forgotten treasure, a film that proves you don't need explosions or big budgets to explore the deepest corners of the human soul. If you've never seen it, this is one 80s classic that truly deserves rediscovery. If you love discovering hidden cinematic masterpieces like this, don't forget to subscribe to Globewise Entertainment, where we bring forgotten Hollywood classics back into the spotlight. Which 80s gem do you think deserves a comeback? Tell us in the comments below. 15. The Unbearable Lightness of Being, 1988. In the late 1980s, Hollywood was filled with flashy blockbusters and wild comedies, but the unbearable lightness of being dared to be something deeper, more intimate, and profoundly human. Directed by Philip Kaufman and based on Milan Kundera's acclaimed novel, this 1988 romantic drama explored the fragile intersection between love, freedom, and political turmoil. Set against the backdrop of the 1968 Prague Spring, the film follows Tomas, played by Daniel Day-Lewis, a passionate surgeon and a hopeless womanizer whose life spirals into chaos when Soviet tanks roll into Czechoslovakia. Juliette Binoche and Lena Olin deliver haunting performances as two women who embody completely different sides of love, one pure and idealistic, the other sensual and unrestrained. Together, they form a love triangle that isn't just romantic, it's philosophical. But what makes this movie unforgettable is how it weaves the personal with the political. It's not about heroes or villains. It's about people caught between desire and destiny, searching for meaning in a world that seems to have lost its own. Despite its emotional depth and breathtaking cinematography, The Unbearable Lightness of Being was overshadowed by louder, more commercial hits of the late 80s. Yet today, it stands as one of the most intellectually and emotionally daring films of the decade, a timeless exploration of how love and loss can coexist with both joy and tragedy. If you're someone who craves stories that challenge the heart and the mind, this forgotten classic deserves your full attention. Watch it once, and it'll linger with you long after the credits roll. And there you have it, 15 forgotten classics from the 1980s that prove great cinema never truly fades away. Each of these films reminds us why the 80s remain one of the most creative and emotional decades in movie history. Which one brought back the most memories for you? Was it a hidden favorite you've already seen, or a new gem you're planning to watch tonight? Tell us your pick in the comments below, we'd love to know. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with your fellow movie lovers, and subscribe to Globewise Entertainment for more journeys into forgotten Hollywood treasures. Until next time, keep the reels spinning, the popcorn popping, and your love for classic cinema alive.